Hi everyone, welcome back to the Hair Loss Show. Russell, good to see you again.
Thank you, Vikram.
So today's topic kind of sounds a bit clickbait kind of thing, in the sense that we're trying to talk about hair transplant, what the myths are. But it is something that we're very passionate about, because that's what we do full time, and we get asked these questions a lot. So it's
Every week,
of course. So it's really good to probably go through probably what are the top 3 myths or fallacies that we hear. You take the first, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so since the introduction of FUE, the way it's been marketed is as a procedure that allows you to avoid the scarring that you get with the strip. So the extrapolation from patients to that is that it's a non-scarring technique. And sadly, in many jurisdictions of the world, the advertising encourages that belief that it's a non-scarring technique. So I get asked all the time, well, like FUE is non-scarring because you just pluck the hairs out. And I'm saying, well, I'm sorry, you can't just pluck the hairs out. If you don't get the root of the hair follicle, then it's not going to grow. So we actually have to cut it out. So we create a little hole in the scalp to pluck that piece of skin out, because really a hair transplant is a skin transplant. Hair is an organ of the skin. If you don't have skin around that hair, it isn't going to grow. Yeah. It comes from the skin itself. So that's number one myth that I have to correct every time, is that there will be scars on the back of your head. In fact, there's more scarring from FUE than there is from the strip in terms of the area when you do a large number of grafts. But it does create tiny little dot scars. So it's the visibility of the scarring that we're talking about that gives this illusion there's no scarring here. But that requires very careful donor management to make sure, because if you excessively harvest in an area, you get the white walling effect, which makes it look like there's not enough hair there to cover the skin. And the skin colour may be a little bit different after the operation, because the scar may be paler than the surrounding skin. So you get that little white dot. Yeah. If there's too many of them in an area, it sure is visible.
And you and I are very passionate about donor area management as well. It is an absolute art, and we see so many times, and it's such a heartbreak to see people who have just desecrated the donor area because it's easy to do, right? And that's what's happened when you've...
more is better.
Well, more is better, or you've delegated the task to someone who's not trained to know what the potential outcome is for future hair loss, etc. May go, well, okay, I can get what I need to make the patient happy, but I can get it from here. I don't need to worry about my neck and straining down and turning the patient's head. I can get what I need from here without worrying, without too much of a sort of inkling into the future of what that may look like, what that will leave the patient with going forward. And I know we've got 3 myths to talk about, but just to highlight this, I have seen so many times on so many sort of internet sort of posts and forums, etc., people talking about, well, the plan should be we'll harvest and then we'll do SMP over the donor area. So they are preparing to over harvest from the donor area, and the fact that they're going to need SMP in that. That's part of the plan. Part of the plan. And that for me is just a sign that they have not thought through and not taken the point that you've made, that FUE does leave you with a scar, and it can sometimes be just horrible.
That's right. I mean, if you transfer the baldness from the top of the head to the back of the head, don't expect a happy patient.
Yes.
And so over-harvesting for whatever you do is never going to turn out well. And it is a trap that many doctors fall into, because they think that the FUE just allows them to go full bore at it.
Yeah. Coming on to another next myth, which you sort of touched on, which is, people think, well, it's, FUE is very simple. You're just plucking the hair out, because maybe they've associated with, other parts where eyebrow plucking, and then you have to do that regularly, for example, which is that the hair grows back. No, the thing is, if you remove that hair, you're removing that hair follicle, you're removing that part of the organ, the skin and the hair follicle.
Stem cells are gone.
Exactly.
They can't create new hair.
Nothing will grow back, and so that's where you're left. So, and that's more to do with the person who's having the hair transplant. That is probably one of the myths that we commonly have to correct, which is that they go, well, you can take whatever you want because it just grows back and it'll be fine, and I'm only limited by my imagination, what I want to achieve, and what the procedure will cost. No, we have to manage the back of the head.
Well,
very, very
I like to
carefully.
use the analogy about a banking analogy. If you call this the donor bank, you're taking withdrawals from the bank. Now, nobody tops up your bank account on your behalf,
Yes.
right? Unless you're employed. But the point is, if you keep pulling money out of your bank account, you're going to run out.
Yes.
Same with hairs on the back of the
Yes.
head. The donor bank, it will get depleted, and there is a limit to what can be taken before we run into visual defects.
Right.
And solving one problem to create another is hardly a good strategy.
So it's not an unlimited source. You're very, very limited from that perspective. And then the third myth that you commonly find
Is the people who believe that all transplants are permanent. Now, there's two things that I'm going to talk about to explain why that's a myth. Number one is as we age, there is a gradual reduction in the number of hairs that will grow on our scalp, and also a gradual reduction in the shaft diameter of hairs. So this is part of what we call senescent or aging hair loss. All right. Now, it may not be very obvious until you get to your 50s or your 60s, but it starts a lot earlier than that. It starts in the mid-20s. And so the reality is your transplanted hairs from the back here are going to go through exactly the same aging process as any other hairs on your head. So we do get this, patients coming and telling us that they don't have the volume they once had in their transplants. Mm-hmm. That's number one. The bigger problem is that it's been inappropriately harvested from a future balding area that wasn't recognised at the time. And so if you harvest it from an area and then later that area starts to thin because you didn't really understand the risk of it, then of course the transplanted hairs will thin as well. So it is rare for people to have the same density of hair 40 years after a transplant as they did immediately after the transplant. You've got to accept that is going to change a little bit, but it's even worse if it's been taken from the wrong area.
And you told me a story before before we started about how on the plane over here you saw someone who's obviously been somewhere and
they've harvested right to the edge of the balding margin, and he's only in his mid-30s by my guesstimate. So I believe because of the pattern, which is a Norwood 6, big crown, plus he had a coronet, even worse, which is that tiny little spot that you get down here below the bald crown up here. So he's a guy that if that coronet is going to join the crown, and he's been harvested all through there. So wherever they put those grafts, they're going to disappear in the next 10 or 15 years.
And that's your example is probably a little bit more extreme because he's this particular gentleman is so far down the line as in a Norwood 6. But if you've got someone who's a Norwood 3 and who's young, you still don't know what the future's going to hold for that person. And so again, when you come back to donor area management and you look, and as someone's looking at the donor area, it is so easy and it's so tempting to go, well, if I harvest over a larger area, well then in 2 weeks' time, that's going to look untouched. It's going to look amazing. Yeah. But you've done that patient a disservice because you haven't done, you haven't taken into account what the propensity is for that person to lose more hair. And if you have harvested in that area, they don't know that some of those grafts that you've transplanted will not be will be impermanent.
We're both unabashedly conservative about this.
Yeah.
But taking an extensive family history helps, but it isn't a given. So my father, bald. My older brother, bald. My younger brother and I, not bald, right? My wife has got a balding brother and a slightly balding brother. And both our sons, who are in their late 30s, have got no baldness. It's a crapshoot.
Yes.
It's not a given that you're going to follow any particular person in the line. And so what we do from a conservative perspective is imagine what's the worst thing that can happen here to this patient. Okay, so let's imagine what the worst outcome is for baldness in this patient. How do we prepare ourselves and how do we plan for that eventuality?
Yes. I think again, I sometimes feel that you and I are probably standing alone on that soapbox in terms of.
Well, we've been in the field long enough to actually see it. I mean, I've got, I took over my mentor's practice, and I've got photos going back to from these patients from the 1970s. So I've got 50 years of photos of patients, and I've got fathers bringing sons along that are balding like the father, and the father's balded away from his grafts, and the son is in there and saying, well, look, you've got to look at this and realise this is the potential future. If we do this wrong, this is what's going to happen. The same problem that's happened to your dad. So if you think short term, as a patient, or you think short term as a doctor, you're going to get into a lot of trouble down the track. And that's part of the problem, unfortunately, we see with a lot of the surgeries we're seeing these days, is that it's way too aggressive in very young patients. And the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be a lot of traumatised patients who have realised that they didn't get great care.
So be cautious from that perspective. But yeah, I hope that's sort of the top three things that we commented. There's probably more fallacies and more things that we have to correct, but these are the top three things.
They come up all the time.
Yes. So I hope you found that useful. Thanks again for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.